So welcome everybody to this latest video on 162 Maths, and in this video we'll be going over some GCSE Maths higher ratio and proportion past exam questions. Now as always I'll include a copy of the questions that we go through in this video for you to have a attempt at before watching this video to see what you can and can't do, and all you need to do to access those questions is click on the link in the description below. So let's get straight into these ratio and proportion questions at higher GCSE level. So looking at question 1, it says the pressure in a tyre is 30 pounds per square inch. Convert the pressure into kilograms per square centimetre, and we've been given the conversions of pounds to kilograms and 1 inch to centimetres. So looking at this first, let's first of all write down what we've got to convert. So we've got 30 pounds per square inch. Now what I'll do is write that first as a fraction. So I'm writing it as 30 over 1. Now the top unit is in pounds and the bottom one is in square inches. Now to convert the pounds into kilograms, I'm going to use this conversion. So I multiply by 0.45 and that gives me a value of 13.5 kilograms. Now to convert square inches into centimetres, well, first thing I need to look at is if I actually draw a square, or what resembles a square, and that's 1 inch and that's 1 inch, giving me a total area of 1 square inch. Now what I then want to do is I want to convert those lengths into centimetres. Now I've been told that 1 inch equals 2.54 centimetres, so that's going to be 2.54 centimetres, and that's going to be 2.54 centimetres. So then working out the area, that's going to be 2.54 squared. So then what I then need to do is multiply 1 by 2.54 squared, and if I leave that as a power, so it's going to be 2.54 squared, and that's in square centimetres. So then all that's left for me to do is then work out what 13.5 divided by 2.54 squared is going to be, and if I type that into my calculator I get an answer of 2.1, and that's kilograms per centimetre squared. Then moving on to question 2, it says x kilometres per hour equals y miles per hour. Use 8 kilometres per hour equals 5 miles per hour to write a formula for y in terms of x. Well, first things first, let's start by writing this as x over y, and that's going to equal 8 over 5. Then with this, all I then need to do is basically just cross multiply, in which I get 5x equals 8y. Now the question wants y the subject, so I need to get the 8 over to the other side, so it's going to be 5x over 8 equals y. So then just write down the answer as 5x over 8. Now alternately you could write 5/8 with an x on the side, so that would be absolutely fine. Then moving on to question 3, it says that Ralph has an iron. He models the base as a rectangle joined by a trapezium. The iron applies a force of 25 newtons and that pressure equals force over area. Work out the pressure using Ralph's model. So we know that the force is 25, so I can write F equals 25. I'm just going to put a little bubble around that because that is my numerator done. So then all that's left for me to do is work out the area. Now the area, or the total area, is going to be the area of the triangle plus the area of the trapezium. Now to work out the area of the triangle, that's just the base times the height divided by 2. So that's going to be 8 times 10 divided by 2, which equals 40. Then to work out the area of the trapezium, well, I'm going to be using the formula of a plus b times h divided by 2. So my a and b are the two parallel sides, so that's 10 plus 13. And I'm going to multiply that by the height, which is 12, and divide that all by 2. And if I do that, I get an area of 138. So then the total area is where I add these two numbers up. So the total area is going to be 178. So then substituting those numbers into the formula, I can then work out the pressure. So P equals, and it's going to be 25 over 178, and that on the calculator gives me a value of 0.14, so it's going to be 0.14. Then for 3b, it says that the actual pressure is the actual pressure greater, equal or less than your answer in part A, and it says tick one box. Well, the question that we need to put is that the answer is going to be less than, and the reason for that is because Rolf's model of the area is actually smaller than the actual area of the iron. So we just need to write something along those lines in the fact that you should be dividing by a bigger number. And you could go into detail as Ralph's area is smaller than the actual area. You could say that the Ralph's measurement is an underestimate, so something along those lines would be good enough for the mark as the explanation. Then moving on to question 4, it says that the diagram shows the side view of a step ladder with a horizontal strut, and the strut is this here, so it's just the support, of a length of 48 centimeters. The strut is 1/3 of the way up the ladder, and the symmetrical cross section of the ladder shows two similar triangles, and it's asking us to work out the vertical height of H of the ladder. So if I just take the triangle out, so here we have two triangles, so the first triangle is the big triangle, and then we've got this smaller triangle inside. Now this triangle here is 2/3, and the big triangle is going to be 3/3. So that means that 48 centimeters as the base is going to equal 2/3. So then to work out what 3/3 is going to be, I do 48 divided by 2 multiplied by 3, and that gives me an answer of 72 centimeters. So this length here is 72. Now the question is asking me to work out the height. So if I take this triangle and draw that again, I know that this is 141, and I know that all of this is now 72 centimeters. Now what I can then do to work out the height is if I just mark the height, let's use a different color, let's go for blue. Here you can see that I've got a right angle triangle where this side here is going to be half of 72, which is 36, and H is what I'm wanting to work out. So using Pythagoras, I get H squared equals C squared minus A squared. So H equals 18585 all square rooted, and if I type that into my calculator, I get an answer of 136.3 centimeters, and that's been rounded to 1 decimal place. Then moving on to question 5, it says that x, y equals c, where c is a constant. Circle the correct statement. So first of all, as you can see, we've got a few y's. So if I can write, if I rearrange this to make y equals a subject, I get c over x. And if I rearrange it to make x the subject, then I get x equals y over c. So looking at this statement here, now because y is first, then I need to use the blue one. So is y directly proportional to x? Well, no, that's not going to be true. Then is y is directly proportional to 1 over x? Well, that is true, so the correct answer is that one there. Now just to prove that the others aren't true, so here y is inversely proportional to 1 over x, or sorry, y is equal to inversely proportional to 1 over x. Well, that's not going to be true, because then it would be y is proportional to 1 over x, which would just equal x. So that's not going to be true. And then x is directly proportional to y, so then x equals, and in this case, rather than using k, they're using c, so it'd be cy, which again is not what's written, so that is going to be wrong again. Then moving on to question 6, it says that p, q, r have positive values. P is directly proportional to the square of q, where p equals 1.25 and q equals 0.5, and q is inversely proportional to r, where when Q is equal to 0.5, R is equal to 6. Work out the value of R when P equals 0.8. So for this particular question, what I need to do is work with this to get a formula involving P and Q. So starting off, it says that P is directly proportional to the square of Q. So if I go through the steps of working with direct proportion, I get equals Q squared. Then substitute the numbers, I get P equals 1.25 when Q is equal to 0.5 squared. So then doing some division, K equals 1.25 divided by 0.5 squared, and I get a K value of 5, which means that the formula then is P equals 5Q squared. I'm just going to put a little box around that. Then moving on to the next bit of information, so looking at this here. So I know that Q is inversely proportional to R. So then going through the steps of working with indirect proportion, I get equals K over R. Then substitute numbers in, I get 0.5 equals K over 6. So K equals 3. So the formula then is going to be Q equals 3 over R. Then all that's left for me to then do is work with this information here. So when P equals 0.8, then Q, then what I get is, let me just put that little box back, and then what we then find is that 0.8 equals 5Q squared. So then 0.8 divided by 5 all square rooted equals Q, and Q equals 2/5. Then what I've then got to do is now substitute Q into this to find out what R is. So I've got 2/5 is equal to 3 over R. Then if I do a bit of cross multiplying, I get 2R equals 15. So R equals 15 over 2, or I can write it as a decimal of 7.5. So any of those two answers for R would be absolutely fine. Then moving on to question 7, it says Jim buys a plant of height of 20 centimeters. The graph shows the height of the plant changes during the next 4 days, and the question is asking us to write down a formula for H in terms of N. Now we know it's a straight line graph, so that means it's going to follow Y equals mx plus c. Now in terms of the y-intercept, I know that c is going to equal 20, so it's going to be y equals mx plus 20. So the next thing that's left for me to then do is work out the gradient. So if I just get rid of that pink little circle. Now to work out the gradient, I basically pick two coordinates. And let's go for this one because it's nice and easy. So that's 0, 20. And let's go for the very last one, which is 4, and it's 32. Let me just get rid of that little purple dot so we can actually see. Yes, it is. And let's pull that dot back. So it's 432. Now to work out the gradient of any 2 points, we can then convert that into a triangle. And the gradient is the difference in y over the difference in x. So looking at the two x ordinates, I've got 0 and 4. So that's going to be 4. And the height is going from 32 to 20, so that's going to be 12. So it's 12 over 4, which equals 3, and the gradient is a positive line, so it's going to be plus 3, so m equals positive 3. So then the equation of the line is going to be y equals, it's going to be 3x plus 20, but in this case, our x is n, so it's going to be 3n plus 20. And our y, rather than using y, we're going to use h instead. So my final formula is h equals 3n plus 20. Now moving on to question 8, it says liquid is leaking out of a container. The graph shows the depth of the liquid for 60 seconds. And it says use the graph to work out an estimate of the rate of decrease of the depth at 10 seconds. You must show you're working out. Now for this, what you need to do is first of all find 10 seconds. And then you want to mark the point at 10 seconds where it's on the curve. Now what we actually need to do is we actually need to work out the gradient of the tangent at this point. So what you need to do is, as the curve is curving sort of inwards, what you need to do is with a ruler is to draw a tangent so it's balancing on that curve where it touches that coordinate at one point only. Now, so you could get something that looks like this. Now, with this, they are looking at the mark scheme, they would accept any answer of the gradient of the line that I've just drawn there. So yours might be slightly different. You may end up with a different answer, but as long as your working out is sound, you will get the full 3 marks. So first things first, you need to mark the point at 10:15, then draw a tangent at that point, and then you need to work out what the gradient is of that line. So then working out the gradient, as we mentioned in the previous question, it's the difference up. Now this is going to have a negative gradient, so it's going to be a minus. And looking at the base of that triangle, I make it out to be 30. And the height is going from, I would say, 21 to, I would say, probably 2. So then it's going to be 19 over 30. And it's going to be a minus. So if I type that into my calculator, so minus 19 over 30, I get an answer of 0.63 recurring. Now, in the mark scheme, they would generally accept any answer between minus 0.8 to minus 0.6. And as you can see, on my diagram, it does fit within. But if you did have an answer that's outside of those ranges, so let's say minus 0.5 or minus 1.2, as long as your diagram shows a tangent at that coordinate and you've attempted to work out the gradient and it's a negative gradient because the line is going downwards, you would get the full marks. Then moving on to question 9, it says that a marathon takes place each year. In 2020, there were 6,500 runners. For each of the next 3 years, the number of runners will increase by 5%. Does this predict that in 2023 there will be more than 7,500 runners? You must show your working out. Now for this is a repeated percentage change or a compound interest question. So here we need to write the original amount, which is 6,500. We multiply by the decimal multiplier of a 5% increase, which is 1.05. And we have that to the power of the number of times, which is 3. So this is what we need to type into our calculator. Now if I type that into my calculator, I get 7524.56, which is more than 7,500. So the answer then is yes, it does. Then moving on to our last question, it says that a sequence of numbers is formed by the iterative process, and we've got un plus 1 equals 3 un plus 1, where our first number is 4. And the question is asking us to work out u2 and u3. So there's a couple of ways in which you can do this. So u2 is going to be where we substitute un for the previous answer. So u2 is going to be 3, and then our previous answer was 4 plus 1. And if I type that into my calculator, I get 3/5, or as a decimal, it's 0.6. So it's going to be 3/5 or 0.6, whichever you prefer to write. Then for u3, it's going to be 3 over my previous answer, which was 0.6 plus 1. And if I type that into my calculator, it gives me 15 over 8, or it's 1.875. So I can either write 15 over 8 or 1.875, and there's my answer for there. Now if I wanted to use a calculator, I'm going to show you I can do this on a calculator, but this could have been a non-calculator or a calculator paper. It's entirely up to you. Well, there's no indication about which one it is. If it was on a non-calculator paper, I'll probably keep it as a fraction, but again, it's entirely up to you which you prefer. So on the calculator, you just type in the first number, which is 4, press equals, then using the fraction button, you enter the formula, but then replace the un with ands plus 1. And if I press equals, that'll give me the next one, which is 0.6, as we said. Press equals again, 15 over 8, or 1.875. Now, just for the benefit of those, if you're wondering about how I'd done this if I didn't use a calculator, well, the first one is going to be this, which can easily be written as a fraction of 3 over 5. Now for the next one, we're looking at 3 over, and it'll be 3 over 5 plus 1. Now if you recognise that 3 over 5 is 0.6, that'll be 3 over 0.6 plus 1, which is 3 over 1.6. Then if I multiply both numbers by 10, I'd get 30 over 16, which is 15 over 8. So just another way you can see how you can do this question if it was on a non-calculator paper.